So you're scanning the globe for that perfect country to study abroad? We have just the right place for you. Austria, located in the heart of Europe. It's home to one of the oldest and most vibrant cultures on the continent. But you do wonder how they came up with those lederhosen and dirndl, because Austrians, they wear them all the time. Plus, lots of yodeling. Not. Want some real facts? Here you go. Size, 83,871 square kilometers. Population, 8.7 million. Capital, Vienna. Oh my, so beautiful. Part of the European Union. Of course. So what about studying there now? Austria boasts 70 top-class universities with more than 380,000 students, of which 25% are international students. Its university system is part of the Bologna process, meaning ease of mobility inside the European Union for you and mutual recognition of degrees. Some other goodies. Various programs taught in English, scholarships and research grants, as well as climate award-winning affordable housing for scholarship holders. Austria is internationally renowned for its music and arts programs. Throughout all programs offered, sustainability and environment play a key role. And for your career after graduation, Austria provides state-of-the-art research facilities across the country. Life there? Well, let's put it this way. 𝗪𝗺𝗠𝗪𝗺. Vienna traditionally leads the pack of the world's most livable cities. Not necessarily because Austria won the Eurovision Song Contest, high five Conchita, but rather for this country's top public transport, social and economic stability, and a world-class range of cultural activities. Speaking of cultural activities, discover world-famous artworks, spend days and nights at the museum, and explore architecture's finest like nowhere else. Wherever your cultural explorations take you, take it gemütlich. Get together and make new friends. In the mood for a party after that? Your super hip outdoor music festival, the classical music concert, or the, oh my gosh, it's already 9 a.m. in the morning underground club is just around the corner. After a crazy night out, you may want to indulge in a 𝗀𝗲𝙀𝗏 sausage at the Würstelstand and, oh yeah, a sweet, sweet Apfelstrudel to top it off. Had too much? Then go out. Move. 𝗎𝗎! 𝗎𝗎? You've probably never heard of 𝗎𝗎, but it's a word you hear all the time in Austria, meaning dude. But actually, it could mean just about everything. By the way, you definitely should get familiar with 𝗪𝗺 𝗨𝗨, 𝗪𝗺, 𝗪𝗀, and 𝗨𝗫. Need a break from all that Austrian? Board a train, jump on a plane, or take the boat. The rest of Europe is closer than anywhere else. Go out, explore, highlight your future. Study in Austria.
The UP National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development, or UP NISMED, is a research and extension unit of the University of the Philippines. Guided by its mandate to improve science and mathematics education, NISMED performs three major functions: research, curriculum development, professional development, and extension services. Through the years, NISMED has been generating new knowledge regarding science and mathematics teaching in the country. Research outputs, such as teaching materials, are tried and tested to teachers and students inside the classroom. Relevant and innovative teaching materials are made available online and at NISMED publications for distribution. In addition, NISMED is highly involved in the framing of the National Science and Mathematics Basic Education curricula. Equipped with subject area specialists, NISMED offers professional development programs which cater to the needs of teachers and educators in the country and Asia-Pacific region. These training programs deepen teachers' understanding of the subject areas they teach. NISMED promotes science teaching through inquiry and teaching mathematics through problem solving. Not only it conducts training programs, but also mentors science and mathematics teachers in the elementary and secondary levels. NISMED also promotes lesson study, a school-based teacher professional development model which originated in Japan and is now gaining popularity in the country. To reach out to various communities, NISMED uses different platforms online. It also ventured into television to popularize science among general viewers and used radio to reach out to more teachers and the public.
Ito po ang programa sa gano'n handog ng UP NISMED.
To further its extension services, NISMED regularly conducts stargazing activities to accommodate school requests. It regularly opens its laboratories, providing opportunities for students to learn science and mathematics concepts and practice their applications. To conduct more effective programs and activities, NISMED partners with both local and international organizations. Committed to excellence, NISMED programs have continuously been achieving awards and recognitions. Since its establishment in 1964, NISMED continues its journey of commitment and service to lead the nation in science and mathematics education.
Today, we are witnessing the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn.
Teaching science and mathematics through storytelling.
Teacher time out.
Feeling the mental health impact of the pandemic.
Building water rockets. A narrative from the 𝗪𝗏𝗪.
Built the 𝗪𝗏𝗪 Natural Park.
Science and mathematics as toy. Second one, which is pick up and release the sticks at the same time, letting them fall.
So you're scanning the globe for that perfect country to study abroad? We have just the right place for you. Austria, located in the heart of Europe. It's home to one of the oldest and most vibrant cultures on the continent. But you do wonder how they came up with those lederhosen and dirndl, because Austrians, they wear them all the time. Plus, lots of yodeling. Not. Want some real facts? Here you go. Size, 83,871 square kilometers. Population, 8.7 million. Capital, Vienna. Oh my, so beautiful. Part of the European Union. Of course. So what about studying there now? Austria boasts 70 top-class universities with more than 380,000 students, of which 25% are international students. Its university system is part of the Bologna process, meaning ease of mobility inside the European Union for you and mutual recognition of degrees. Some other goodies. Various programs taught in English, scholarships and research grants, as well as climate award-winning affordable housing for scholarship holders. Austria is internationally renowned for its music and arts programs. Throughout all programs offered, sustainability and environment play a key role. And for your career after graduation, Austria provides state-of-the-art research facilities across the country. Life there? Well, let's put it this way. 𝗪𝚢𝗪 12 Vienna traditionally leads the pack of the world's most livable cities. Not necessarily because Austria won the Eurovision Song Contest, high five Conchita, but rather for this country's top public transport, social and economic stability, and a world-class range of cultural activities. Speaking of cultural activities, discover world-famous artworks, spend days and nights at the museum, and explore architecture's finest like nowhere else. Wherever your cultural explorations take you, take it gemütlich. Get together and make new friends. In the mood for a party after that? Your super hip outdoor music festival, a classical music concert, or the, oh my gosh, it's already 9 a.m. in the morning underground club is just around the corner. After a crazy night out, you may want to indulge in a 𝗀𝗲𝗏 sausage at the Würstelstand and, oh yeah, a sweet, sweet 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗏 to top it off. Had too much? Then go out. Move. 𝗎𝙢𝙀! 𝗎𝙢𝙀? You've probably never heard of 𝗎𝙢𝙀, but it's a word you hear all
We also have from, we also have from, again, from Quezon City, from Marikina City, San Jose del Monte City. Okay, so again, happy Women's Month, everyone. And keep those comments coming. This is a two-way conversation and we want to hear from you. Before we dive in, let's do a quick fun check-in. Drop an emoji that best describes how you're feeling today. Yes, good afternoon, Miss Koino. Magandang hapon po lahat sa inyo. So today, I feel so excited. We have two speakers. What else? Good afternoon from 𝗪𝗛𝗪 High School Division Office, Quezon City. We also have participants from Isabela State University, Kawayan Campus. We also have, I'll just go back to the thread to mention all your locations. We also have from BIGA Integrated National High School, Cabuyao. ISU Kawayan Campus also, and also from UP Law Complex. Okay, from our colleagues here in the university. We also have from Cagayan Valley, Region 2. Hello, everyone. Okay, so before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button, share this stream with your friends, and subscribe or follow so you won't miss any of our upcoming event or content. Also, we'll be doing some shout outs later throughout the stream, so stay engaged in the comments, and who knows, you might hear your name live. So let's mention some names. We have from Anthony Lasala from Isabela State University. We have a lot of participants, virtual participants from Isabela State University. Miss RK, of course, from San Jose del Monte City, Bulacan. What are you most excited about in today's session, everyone? In the comment box. We also have from Steven Sales-Caballo from 𝗪𝗵𝗂 Senior High School. Let's see. We're excited about what? Let me just check the comment section. Okay, there's a heart reaction there. Okay, so, all right, let's get into it. Good afternoon to everyone joining us from Quezon City, Metro Manila, across the country, and around the world. Welcome to the 4th Women in STEAM webinar with the theme Empowered Women in STEAM, Innovating, Adapting, and Leading with Resilience. This annual event, hosted by the University of the Philippines National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development, UP-NISMED, in partnership with the Austrian Embassy, Manila, is dedicated to celebrating the remarkable contributions and achievements of women in science, technology, engineering, arts or agriculture, and mathematics or STEAM. Since 2022, Women in STEAM has been a vital part of our Women's Month celebration. I am Ivy Mejia, and it is my honor to be your host for today's event. This afternoon, we will hear from inspiring women leaders who have broken barriers, pioneered innovations, and continue to pave the way for future generations. We will now formally start the program with the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, followed by the National Anthem of the Republic of Austria.
Bayang mabiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisihin, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bakaw, may nilagang tula at akin sa paglayang minamahal, ang kisap ng wagawan mo'y tagumpay na nagtitinig, ang bituin at araw na kailan pa may di magdidilig, lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay namin sa piling mo, aming ligaya na pag may mga api, mamamatay lang dahil sa'yo.
Now, to welcome us to this special gathering, let us listen to the welcome remarks from Chancellor Edgardo Carlo L. Destan II of the University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and thank you for coming together to participate in the 4th Women in STEAM webinar. This event is a testament to the unwavering commitment of the UP National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development, or UP NISMED, to inclusivity and gender equality in science, technology, engineering, arts or agriculture, and mathematics, or STEAM. From the time of its establishment in 2022, Women in STEAM has successfully established dynamic collaborations with key institutional partners, including the Austrian Embassy, the International Labour Organization, the Department of Education, the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the Philippine Commission on Women, and the Center for Integrated STEM Education Incorporated. Together, we have worked to make sure that women's voices are heard, their abilities are acknowledged, and their leadership is developed in STEAM-related disciplines. As we convene the 4th installment of Women in STEAM, the theme, Empowering Women in STEAM, Innovating, Adapting, and Leading with Resilience, reminds us to honor the incredible strength and determination women across generations have consistently demonstrated in their respective fields. Their groundbreaking innovations and artistic achievements go well beyond academic milestones. They are significant acts of redefining possibilities and inspiring future generations to dream higher and think deeper while overcoming systemic barriers and societal expectations. Despite these women-led developments, the gender gap remains a persistent challenge. In the Philippines, data show that although 4 out of 10 STEAM graduates are women, less than half of them pursue careers related to their fields of study. The underrepresentation of women in these sectors, the lack of career prospects, and the pay gaps that undervalue their contribution are the main causes of this issue. Let us be motivated to celebrate the remarkable works of women, encourage young girls to pursue careers in these fields, and gradually break barriers that still stand in their way as we engage in today's discussions and listen to inspiring stories of our guests. Advancing women in STEAM is not just a cause for women. It is a collective responsibility that benefits all. On behalf of the UP Diliman community, I would like to extend my gratitude to UP NISMED and the Austrian Embassy in Manila for organizing this webinar. To all our resource speakers and participants, thank you very much for sharing your time and insights in this meaningful event. Your presence strengthens our shared commitment to building a more inclusive and equitable future in STEAM. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang kababaihan sa STEAM.
Thank you, Chancellor Bistan, for that inspiring message. Indeed, empowering women in STEAM plays a significant role in human capital development. So other than providing support, we need to sustain that support for women, for us. We are now privileged to hear a message of support. First, let us hear from the Austrian Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Ambassador 𝗪𝙀𝙀.
Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat, and happy Women's Month. I'm delighted to speak once again at this inspiring event, a project that began a few years ago through the collaboration of UP NISMED, the Austrian Embassy, and other partners, dedicated to honoring and celebrating the remarkable women who have shaped and continue to influence the world of science, technology, engineering, arts, agriculture, and mathematics, STEAM. This year's theme highlights the extraordinary strength, innovation, and leadership that women bring to these fields. Women are not just breaking barriers in science and technology. They're redefining what is possible, adapting to changing challenges, and leading with unmatched resilience. And on this special day, I'm thrilled to join all of you in celebrating empowered women of Austria and the Philippines whose contributions to STEAM are both inspiring and transformative. Austria has long been a hub for groundbreaking contributions in both the arts and sciences. The legacy of Austrian women shines brightly, particularly in STEAM fields where their resilience and innovation have led to world-changing advancements. Berta von Suttner, Lisa Meitner, Hedy Lamarr, Margarete Schütte-Lihotzky, Anna Freud, and even Elfriede Jelinek. All of them are great role models who exemplify how determination, creativity, and leadership can intersect to create lasting change in both the sciences and the arts. And while we talk about the remarkable women from Austria, the Philippines, and around the world, let us not forget that each of you, as educators, also has the power to inspire change, drive progress, and lead the way. In true leadership, it's not just about breakthroughs and groundbreaking achievements. It's about how we adapt and remain resilient, and how we use our platforms to uplift and empower others. Today and every day, let us remember that the ones who will help shape the world of tomorrow are empowered women of today. So let us begin today. From the labs to the art studios, from classrooms to the boardroom, let us do our best to inspire the next generation to build a brighter future where possibilities are limitless. And as an ally, I reaffirm my commitment to helping all of you to lift up voices, amplify stories, and create opportunities for more women and girls to innovate, adapt, and lead with the same resilience that has defined the remarkable women before us. Maraming salamat po. I wish all of you an engaging, insightful discussion and a successful event. Happy International Women's Month. Mabuhay ang mga kababaihan.
Thank you, Ambassador Brigger, for your heartfelt message of support. We deeply appreciate the commitment of the Austrian Embassy in Manila to advancing and celebrating women in STEAM in the Philippines and across the globe. We are also expecting a message from Senator Sonny M. Angara, Secretary of the Department of Education Philippines. Should his message become available, we will make time to share them later in the program. At this juncture, we will also hear a recording message of support from Ms. 𝗪𝗓 R. Villanueva, Coordinator of the Gender Office, UP Diliman.
Good afternoon. The UP Diliman Gender Office stand in solidarity with UP NISMED and the Austrian Embassy in advancing the rights of women through meaningful celebration of Women's Month. With the theme Empowered Women in STEAM, Innovating, Adapting, and Leading with Resilience, this event serves as a powerful reminder of the critical roles that women play in shaping the future of science, technology, engineering, arts, agriculture, and mathematics. By innovating or adapting and leading with resilience, women continue to break barriers, inspire future generations, and contribute significantly to nation building and global progress. We actually have witnessed the incredible innovations and breakthroughs made possibly by women in science, technology, by STEAM. And you too can be part of this growing movement. If we collectively put our efforts into creating inclusive spaces, nurturing talent, and breaking down barriers, we can empower more women and girls to lead, adapt, thrive in these fields. Let this event be a celebration of what has been achieved and a call to action for what more we can accomplish together. May we continue to champion women's invaluable contributions and ensure that their resilience and brilliance illuminate the path toward a more innovative, inclusive, and equitable future. Mabuhay ang kababaihan sa STEAM. Happy Women's Month.
Thank you, Ms. Villanueva. The message of support that we heard today reminded us the importance of sustainable programs to assure full equal access and systemic equality for women in STEAM education and professions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for our first presentation. To introduce our first speaker, may I call on Ms. 𝗪cie𝗺𝗲𝗠𝗪, Press, Cultural and Human Rights Officer from the Austrian Embassy in Manila.
Thank you, Doc Ivy. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this webinar, Dr. Pamela Cajilig. Dr. Cajilig is a design anthropologist who has been a passionate advocate for disaster resilience, climate adaptation, and health equity. She has spent much of her career championing participatory design and architecture, ensuring that communities are empowered to face the challenges of disasters and climate change. Her groundbreaking work includes the construction of a gender-responsive evacuation center during Typhoon Yolanda recovery, the establishment of 80 affordable primary care clinics in urban areas, and innovative housing solutions for factory workers. She has also contributed to flood risk management efforts, integrating gender equality and inclusivity for practitioners in South and Southeast Asia. Many of her pioneering projects have been implemented through Curiosity, a user research firm working with the public, private, and civic sectors to create meaningful products and services, and where she has served as its founding president. She is also a senior fellow of the Atlantic Fellows for Health Equity in Southeast Asia at the Atlantic Institute at Oxford University and a global fellow at Brown University Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Studies. She's also a professional lecturer at the University of the Philippines College of Architecture, where she teaches futures thinking to reimagine hospitals and health facilities for climate-resilient futures, with support from the British Council. She finished her PhD at Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology School of Architecture and Urban Design, concurrently serving as lecturer and course coordinator for the university's master's program in disaster, design, and development. Her efforts in participatory design and inclusive disaster management were recognized by the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Australian government at the 2021 Asia Pacific Women's International Leadership Awards. With her extensive expertise in disaster management and design, Dr. Cajilig continues to be a leading voice in advancing inclusive and climate-resilient futures. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Pamela Cajilig.
Hello, Ms. Madeline. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here today, and good day to our hosts and all our honored guests for this session. So before I move into my presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about my connection to UP NISMED. So my mother worked at UP NISMED for about 20 years. So I grew up in UP NISMED. She was in the elementary mathematics division, I believe. And growing up, I saw her and her all-women colleagues in the department go around the country addressing the most pressing issues that we have in basic education at that time. So I'm sure that seeing such strong women take a lead in such an important sector in the Philippines has really shaped me in wanting to do more for society as a woman and for women in general. So of course, when my own mother asked me to do this talk for UP NISMED, how can I say no, right? I consider this institution as my home. I'm glad to be here also because I am a social scientist working in a lot of STEM areas. So my training is really in anthropology, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But my work takes me to all these spaces where people with more stronger STEM backgrounds work, like doctors, architects, and engineers. So it's really great to be able to share and have an exchange today about women in STEM in general and how we can be more interdisciplinary about our approach to solving resilience-related problems. So with that, I will start sharing my presentation. Okay. I hope everyone can see my presentation, and I have the Facebook chat open. So if you can't, just let me know if you have problems. Okay. So I was introduced as a design anthropologist, and that's really not a term that a lot of people are familiar with. So if you haven't heard about it, we'll break it down for you today. So as a design anthropologist, so let's break it down now. I'm design muna and then anthropology. So when I talk about design, it's a bit different from how people really understand design in a popular context. Design basically means it's related to, say, fashion design, or furniture design, or architecture. However, I'm from the school of thought that we all have the capacity to design. No? If we are doing activities, planning activities, engaging with materials so that we can meet certain ends, then to a certain extent, we all have the capacity to be designers, right? So in this sense, even, for example, planning a meal, or somebody living in an informal settlement building a house can be considered as a designer. Now, anthropology has many textbook definitions, the most popular of which is probably, it's the comparative study of the human experience. But the definition of anthropology that I gravitate to is really, it's the art and science of taking the other seriously. So what do we mean by the other? No, on a more surface level, it could be just anyone, no, with a different background or upbringing compared to us. It can be someone who is not part of our family, not part of our friendship group, not part of our province, or not a Filipino or a part of our country. But on a deeper level, it also means others are people who have been forgotten by society. So in Tagalog, others can be people who are in the laylayan, no? Who are empowered but don't have a voice, or have a voice but are not listened to, and then are not included when we design things such as schools or hospitals or healthcare programs, for example, or even education programs. So when I say I'm a design anthropologist, what I mean is my work is focused on ensuring that the others in our society, the ones in our laylayan, are included in projects that are related to design. And I take a broad view of design. This can be in a formal sense, or in a more conventional sense, like architecture, but it also can refer to, a service, no, or other types of products.
Dr. Pam, can I interrupt you for a while? You can see your screen. You want us to assist you, ma'am?
Okay, sure. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, tech team, kindly share Doc Pam's screen, slides. There you go, ma'am. Please resume. Thank you.
Okay, we can go to the next slide after design anthropologist. Yeah. Next slide. Okay. So my introduction to design has been really my involvement in Typhoon Yolanda recovery and response. So at the time, I just finished my master's degree in anthropology. I had just co-founded my design research firm, Curiosity, and we were partnered with a women's rights organization to go to different barangays affected in the Visayas affected by Typhoon Yolanda. So we did an initial rapid assessment during this time. So as you can imagine, 90% of all the structures were damaged. I went around 10 barangays with an architect, understanding how houses were destroyed. And I can see from the chat that we have people watching from Tacloban. So hello, yes. So I'm really appreciative of the hospitality and kindness and generosity that the people extended to us when we were here in Ground Zero, understanding why the disaster happened. And at the time, I really was not doing anything related to architecture, but that experience in Yolanda and in Tacloban in particular made me realize that, we really live and die by our built environment, and that made me very interested to take up post-disaster housing reconstruction and architecture later on. Next slide, please. Yeah, so from then on, I've done a lot of design projects in architecture and otherwise, and mostly really that experience also entrenched in me that we really, really need to be able to listen to grassroots and local communities if we want things to work in this country. So for the last 10 years or so, I've started to pivot my work. I used to work in marketing and advertising before I was an anthropologist. So I started to pivot my work to design from the ground up, design from the point of view of grassroots communities. And I wanted to take this chance to share some of the lessons that I learned along the way. The first of which is, when you're an expert, quote unquote, called on to present solutions and understand the needs of communities affected by disasters, not everyone will agree with you. And it's the typical response of that is to just reinforce your background, reinforce your expertise, or whatever past thing you've done, I suppose reinforce the superiority of your knowledge as an expert, quote unquote. But what I realize is that when you start listening to communities, and when communities particularly disagree with your plans as a so-called expert, you need to listen, because communities who experience our most pressing problems are also experts in their own right, because they're the ones who are familiar with these problems. They're the ones who are living with these problems from day to day. So I have a case study to illustrate each of these points. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, right, we went around doing consultation for our humanitarian shelter program. This is about building a gender-responsive evacuation center. But in the beginning, it was not clear to us that this should be the structure that we should be building. In fact, in the initial discussions between our group, with our women's rights partner and our international donors, we all agreed that, okay, well, a lot of the houses were destroyed because they were built with light materials. So as an advocacy, why don't we build permanent housing instead, with concrete, with proper foundations, for example, so that if the next typhoon comes, then these houses will be resilient to disaster. The problem is these permanent houses, they cost more, right, than houses with light materials. And we were working with a small NGO who didn't have as many funds as one of the larger organizations in the country. So it means we really had to limit the number of people, and vulnerable women in particular, that we would give the houses to. So we started that program using design thinking and prototyping some of the suggested designs of our partner architect. Next slide. So we really went around the 10 barangays with these prototypes, asking people what they thought of the designs. We went out of our way. We realized at the time a lot of the men in the communities would discourage us from talking to their wives or their daughters because construction is not a woman's domain. So we really had to push and really go out of our way to be able to understand what women thought of these designs. Next slide. But not everything went as planned. When we identified the vulnerable women who would be receiving the support to build permanent homes, we realized that this was not what communities wanted. In one particular community, the women that we selected, so for example, senior citizens who were also facing mental health issues, or pregnant women who had lost their husbands in the storm surge, didn't really welcome us going to them and telling them that, we've pre-selected you to receive this kind of assistance. At that time, food relief was still ongoing in Leyte. So these women who had lost the men in their lives, or were living without men in their household to begin with, had become dependent on men in their community to, for example, bring them sacks of rice every time there was a food relief, or carry big bottles of water to their household. At the same time, the men in this particular community felt quite upset because they said everyone lost, not everything, not just women. So we had to listen to this conflict that we were having on the ground, and really take a step back and rethink, are we really doing it right? And I like telling this case because it really shows how a shift in thinking can lead to a culturally and gender responsive solution for a community. So given the tensions in this community, what became clear to us is that it's not feasible to give only a few houses. We need to be able to broaden the recipients of our resources. So instead of providing permanent housing, we said, okay, let's just give out shelter kits with roofing materials, plywood, etc., so that more people can benefit. Next slide. So when we were asked to go to another community to do humanitarian shelter activities again, we said, okay, let's take a big step back, because it seems like in the previous community we had a lot of assumptions that were not working. So we said, okay, we held a big community consultation for the 4 barangays represented, and we were very upfront with them with our initial assumptions and with a project that did not initially work. So we said, our assumption, our definition of vulnerability, because we're a women's rights group, is that vulnerability is really about vulnerable women, who were really deeply affected by the disaster because of pre-existing characteristics or conditions, like, for example, being a senior citizen or being a person with disability. So we asked them, okay, that's our definition of vulnerability. What's your definition of vulnerability? And the group said, oh, that's easy. Because during Typhoon Yolanda, it was really the upland and island communities who could not immediately access food, medicine, and safe shelter during the impact of the typhoon that we believe are most vulnerable. So we had to do the shift of thinking, from vulnerable women to the upland and island communities, who could not really access disaster relief immediately. The next thing that we did differently was, in the first site, we didn't share with the community what our funding limitations are. So we just presented what we thought the best solution was to them immediately. But with the second community, we were very transparent. This is how much we have. And the thing with a lot of work with INGOs is, once they say, okay, this is your budget for shelter, for example, it's hard to go back to them and say, let's not do shelter, let's do something with livelihood instead. So the constraint was, given that small budget, we still needed something to do related to shelter. So with that constraint, we shared with them, okay, with this limited budget, our approach in the previous community was to build a few permanent houses and give them to the most vulnerable women. What then can we do with this in your community, given our financial limitations? So they said, it really won't work if you give a few houses only, because that will cause a lot of tension in the community. So why don't we just build one structure where more people can benefit? So that's how we ended with a gender responsive evacuation center. I think it was the first center that was purposely built as an evacuation center in the Visayas region. So we built that upon the suggestion of the community in that consultation program. Now, because we were still working with a women's rights group, and one of the conditions of the donor was that it still has to be gender or women related, what we did was we organized the community. We formed a women defenders organization and trained them in preventing, for example, violence against women and children. And at the same time, they were assigned to run the community center. So the shift really was from this idea of co-design from the first case to co-creation, co-design, and co-production in the second case. In the first case, we had already identified permanent housing as the solution. So it was just a matter of identifying the appropriate design and the appropriate features of the housing. But in the second case, we shifted and involved the community even more. So co-creation is basically starting with problem definition, involving the people who are affected in defining the problem in the first place. No, in this case, it was, how do we provide shelter for the most vulnerable members of the community? So, and vulnerability was defined by the people affected, and so was the type of shelter to be built. And finally, co-production, because the shelter was built through a cash for work scheme for the community, which also allowed the men to participate in the project. Next slide. So this is the evacuation center that we built. We decided that the plan was really for it to be 2 floors, but we decided as soon as the first floor was finished, we decided to inaugurate it right away. It's called a Gender Responsive Evacuation Center because one big problem in evacuation, and some of you in the audience who have experienced evacuation might be able to relate to this, no? That there are a lot of canned goods and used clothing that are provided by donors, but then there's no place to cook. There's no place to wash clothes because what we normally do in the Philippines for evacuation is repurpose an existing structure, like schools. Oh, you're all in education, alam na alam niyo yun, no? Nire-repurpose ang schools for evacuation or stadiums, but these are not structures that are really meant to accommodate temporary housing. No, they're not meant to be housing. So kulang ang mga toilet, for example. So, and when there are no toilet facilities or no kitchen facilities for washing and cooking and doing laundry, then sinong namumroblema? It's usually women. It's usually the mothers, no? Kasi yung care responsibility during evacuation is assumed by mothers and women in the communities. So this was gender responsive because there were a lot of, it was built, no, so that there would be multiple washing areas, multiple cooking areas, multiple toilets as well. Because one of the things that we discovered in our research on evacuation is that the LGBTQ members of the community are often excluded from using either toilet. So having a lot of toilets also allowed us to allot some toilets for universal use. Next slide, please. So yun, so our decision to inaugurate the evacuation center, even if the second floor was not yet built, proved to be a good decision because when Typhoon Ruby threatened the same areas that were hit by Yolanda, near a year after Yolanda happened, no? True enough, the evacuation center was used by the upland and island members of the community to evacuate. So that really showed that if you really listen to the people who are most affected by the problems, then and appreciate the fact that when people disagree with what you think as an expert, quote unquote, then it can lead to much, much better and more culturally and gender responsive solutions. Next slide. Okay. My second case and my second learning is the urgency of centering local knowledge, which is in a way related to the first case, no? Kasi once we realized that conflict for us, that we really need to attend to the local knowledge of the communities that we're working with. Next slide. Okay, so one of my favorite projects for 2024 was capacity building for measurement and evaluation for urban innovation impact evaluation. So for this, I partnered with the Las Piñas Persons with Disability Federation, who was given a grant by the Center for Disaster Preparedness to do emergency-related innovations. This effort was also funded by a humanitarian advisory group. So the frustration of many PWDs in the country is that once for example, you have a mobility issue, you're already stuck at home. And what they really wanted was for PWDs to be out and about, to not have to be designated to just stay in the house, and for PWDs to be contribute to society and not be seen as a burden, no? But that's hard to do because mobility, accessibility in urban areas is really not where it needs to be for PWDs. If you don't own a car as a PWD with mobility issues, it's really difficult to get around urban spaces here in Metro Manila. And if you don't have a car, then hiring transportation to be able to get around is also very expensive. And it's particularly a problem if an emergency like a health emergency arises. Next slide. Okay, so what this community of persons with disability did propose for their project is this emergency accessible mobile transportation service. So it's basically a vehicle for persons with disabilities that they contributed to the design themselves, no? So the people in the photo in the last slide that you've seen, they went through a process called design thinking, where they test and iterate the design of this vehicle, working very closely with an engineer to design its features. So even the height of the vehicle, for example, the functions of the door, the handrails, the seat belts, for example, these were all designed while testing it with the persons with disabilities who will be using it. So they even conduct rides across Las Piñas just to test, for example, the condition of the humps in the city and how this vehicle can be made safe for persons of disabilities and their caregivers using this vehicle when humps happen. And I've been working with them for the impact evaluation of this project, which then allows them to better advocate for accessible transportation in urban areas, no? So they're able to use the results of the research to go to different barangays and show them that being able to run this sort of program is not expensive. Most barangays turn down the idea of sponsoring accessible transportation because they think that it would require the purchase of a vehicle that's very expensive. But through their design thinking methodologies, they're able to show that you take an existing vehicle already owned by the barangay and apply their process so that it can be made friendly for persons with disabilities. And what's really great about this is that it's been used, no, according to how it was planned. So the persons of disabilities and Las Piñas are booking this vehicle to not just go to medical appointments, but also to go to church, to watch movies in the mall. And they're also using this for humanitarian efforts for other PWDs around the country. So you really see that PWDs have their own sense of agency. They are empowered. And they're not just people who are waiting for help to happen, because when we give them the right tools and when they are when they are able to advocate for the right tools, then they can contribute to society. They're not a burden. Next slide. Yeah, so this was us planning for their this was us doing the capacity building training for impact evaluation. And if you're interested in this case, I also pasted the cover of our report. This is open access, and they're free to download this. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm so happy for them because they were also featured in GMA's Game Changer segment in 24 Oras as an example of, a great innovation that is really impactful and feasible. And they have so many plans for this as far as resilience is concerned, no? So the last time that I was talking to them, they realized na a lot of PWDs are not able to escape fires when fires happen. So may mga incidences din of death. So what they're trying to do now is they're trying to map all the houses in their community that have PWD so that when there's a fire, this vehicle knows how to position themselves. They're also continuing their design thinking and innovation activity so that they can plan this better for when incidences of flood, for example, happen and there's a PWD that, for example, needs to be rushed to the hospital. So they're such a driven group. It's been so easy working with them because they know exactly what they want and how to do it. And they've been going around the country and even around the world talking about this innovation. Next slide. Okay, and finally, I'll go to my last case. So one of my other realizations is the need for cross-disciplinary features thinking for disaster and climate resilience. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not primarily in STEM. I'm really a social scientist, but I do work with a lot of people in STEM. And what that has made me realize is that we really need to have cross-disciplinary conversations because our approaches have to be as complex as the problems that we are trying to solve. And futures thinking is important because what we are experiencing now may not be what we're experiencing tomorrow, right? Or 5, 10, 50, 100 years from now. We need to be able to envision how our relationship with technology, for example, will change, so that we can respond accordingly. And if it is leading to futures that we don't want, then we can articulate what futures we want so that we can actually work toward those. Next slide. So in the private chat, I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why I'm also glad that this event is happening is because it allows me to reconnect with Austria as my sponsor in the post-city event in Ars Electronica in Linz, which is a city in Austria. And Ars Electronica is a cultural institution that hosts the largest digital arts festival in the world. So I was there in 2015. It was such a landmark year. for humanity, for the global community in general, because this is when the Sustainable Development Goals were signed by UN member parties. This is when UN member parties also signed the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Landmark year for policy, particularly for sustainable development, because 2015 was the year when the urban global population for the first time exceeded the rural population. So the theme of that event in Linz in Austria, I was there as part of their Future Innovators program, was to imagine what life would be if 100% of the global population would now become urban. So we had a series of futures thinking workshops, and Linz, the Electronic Arts Festival, was the perfect place to host that, because it just was filled with all these exhibits that allowed us to reimagine different types of urban futures. So that was my first introduction in futures thinking. I put a pin in it for a long time because I really wasn't sure how I could integrate it in my work. And even though futures thinking has been around for decades, it really was not part of the academic or even industrial conversation here in the country. Next slide. I began to think about futures thinking again during the pandemic. I became part and now co-lead the Metafuturism Lab, which is an interdisciplinary network filled with practitioners from around the world. So in our network, we have people like me who are social scientists, we have doctors, we have physicists, musicians, and you know how it was in 2020, we were all stuck at home. So we used this pause around the world to be able to meet quarterly and just do futures thinking workshops amongst ourselves. So from just meeting in our homes quarterly, the Metafuturism Labs activity grew. So 3 of us are co-leading it. I'm co-leading it from the Philippines. Our founder is Mona Nasser is co-leading it from Plymouth in the United Kingdom. We have another co-lead, Yvette Gonzalez, who is leading it from Miami. And so it has spun off to a lot of projects related to futures thinking and reimagining technology and our relationship with technology. So the poster on the right was for a futures thinking workshop where we reimagine clinical trials for interplanetary missions. Our founder works with the Plymouth Institute Health and Care Research. Is also an astrophysicist, so very interdisciplinary, and has been thinking of how do we take care of the health of astronauts, right? What kind of medicines will they need? What kind of healthcare will they need as more and more interplanetary missions become possible? Part of the work has also included that bottom picture in the middle. That's part of a creative robotics workshop, right? Where we reimagined the future of the relationship between humans and robots. This happened in the UK, I believe, and in Belgium. And just reimagining, what would be the more dystopian futures be? What would be the more utopian futures? And how do we prevent the dystopian futures from happening? A lot of this work happens through science fiction. So in these workshops, we encourage participants to write short stories that embody their visions of the future as it relates to technology. So very verbal din yung output ng mga workshop na to. Next slide. But because I'm in the Philippines and I work in architecture, our output for futures thinking in the Philippines in the Metafuturism Lab is more visual. So what we did was to run a futures thinking workshop for architecture, for climate extreme, so assuming flood and extreme heat. And we did this in UP Diliman, College of Architecture in 2023. Putting together architects and students and anthropologists, filmmakers, futurists, climate scientists, science communicators, creative writers, and educational technologists. So we can all together discuss what the future could be like in relation specifically to flooding and extreme heat happening at the same time. Now, this was in 2023, and the idea that flooding and extreme heat could happen simultaneously seemed, at that time, we were assuming it's maybe something that would happen 5, 10, 15 years from now. But if you remember, in 2024, around this time last year, no, ang init-init, and then around May, biglang mainit, and then uulan bigla, no? So that's what meteorologists call precipitation whiplash. It's some of the effects, no, of climate change in a way. So parang that future na we thought was gonna happen 5 years from that time, nangyari kaagad siya in a few months. So that's why it's really important to think about the future, because we need to be prepared, diba, for all the hazards that we are experiencing in relation to our vulnerabilities as a country. Next slide. So what happened in that workshop was we invited climate scientists from the Oscar M. Lopez Center for Climate Resilience to give a talk. And also, we also featured from their project, Mga Kwentong Klima Film Festival, young filmmakers who had joined the film festival by submitting short films about their experiences and about their thoughts of climate change. And we used the films, no, to stimulate, to provoke thinking among our architecture students. We were working with undergrads so that they could also think, no, about what future worlds could be like. And it was a really interesting conversation between filmmakers and architects, so very STEAM, no? Because they both saw themselves as creators of worlds, and there was a lot of talk about, you know, creative processes, processes of imagination, the role, how filmmakers, for example, imagine technologies in their films, no? Technologies that Filipinos could one day use because of how climate change will play out in this country. Next slide. So this was some of the work from that one-day workshop in Diliman. And the students really came up with really interesting designs, considering that they only had an afternoon to do this. Some of these were very strong conceptually, no? Like, for example, itong Después Diluvia idea, students imagined na we would be living in vertical cities, and dahil sobrang wala ng space, no, na overtake na ng flooding, but at the same time mainit. So buildings with high-rise buildings that have more that have better airflow would be more sought out for, no? And society would be fighting for these kinds of buildings. So yun, no? So it's showing how our students reimagine a more unequal future if we do not manage the effects of climate change. Next slide. Okay, so from that one day, so we try to keep iterating on our workshop ideas for futures thinking. From that one-day workshop in Diliman last month, we just concluded the repair shop for tomorrow, another futures thinking workshop naman for the College of St. Benilde. So from one day, this was now a 3-day workshop. We decided to focus on extreme heat, assuming na you know, this would be increasingly a problem for us, no, that we would need to face, because the UN the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction during the pandemic had actually announced that the next big crisis that the world is going to face, that is COVID level, would probably be related to extreme heat. So we decided to focus the workshop on extreme heat. Next slide. So we had the Futures Bazaar on the 3rd day, where students set up different booths to talk about, to sell, quote unquote, their design ideas for urban extreme heat A lot of these were health related and medical related, which shows the entanglement of climate risks, no, and health risks. And they used the Futures Bazaar to get feedback, not just from their fellow participants, but also from faculty and from visitors at St. Peniel during that time. Next slide. Yes, I'm about to end. Okay, so because the last topic is futures thinking, I wanted to talk about a futures project. So from the one-day workshop in Diliman to the 3-day workshop in Benilde, we had managed to secure funding to run a semester-long futures thinking exercise with our graduate students in architecture at UP Diliman. This is through funding from the British Council International Collaboration Grant. So we are working with an informal settlement to do futures thinking for climate futures with our students. And the goal of this award is for our students to produce artwork with the community that would represent what their visions are for the future, and which would help us to reimagine health facilities, no, that are resilient even in the face of climate extremes. So the idea here is for art and design from the global south to influence humanitarian policy in the global north. So we will be in September bringing the artwork conceptualized with the community for an exhibit in London, followed by a policy workshop with members of parliament that have a sway in decision-making for the UK's Overseas Development Assistant. So what we want is for experiences in the Philippines to shape how humanitarian assistance for the Global South will be decided upon, and focusing on climate and health. Next slide. So yeah, so those are the 3 lessons that I learned along the way that I hope I was able to impart during this talk. First is that let's notice when us as experts go down to communities, we have to notice when communities disagree with us and use that conflict, that tension, no, as provocation to make things better, to do things that are more relevant to the community. Secondly is the urgency of centering local knowledge. So the people who experience the problem are experts in their own right, as the case study with persons with disabilities has illustrated. And finally, the need for cross-disciplinary futures thinking for disaster and climate resilience. No discipline can solve our problems alone. We really need to be talking with each other. So that's why the concept of STEAM and social scientists interacting with each other, with communities, is really, really important, because the more inclusive we are, the more diverse perspectives that we have, the better our chances of getting it right. So thank you very much, and I hope you learned something today.
Thank you, Dr. Cajilig, for that insightful presentation and sharing your 3 learnings. Your contributions truly embody the essence of innovation and design, as we've seen it in your presentation, and leadership in resilience and STEAM. Actually, yung A sa STEAM namin, lalagyan na natin ng anthropology. It's really, really relevant now. So we will include that in our next content and events. Now, to our virtual audience, let's take a moment for a question and answer session. I know you have a lot of questions there and comments. We will now open the floor for questions. We will be accommodating 3 to 4 questions. So if you have any questions, please type them in the Facebook or YouTube comment section. Now, I'm checking the comment box. Dr. Cajilig, by the way, Dr. Cajilig was my professor. So regards po kay Ma'am Norma, Dr. Norma Cajilig. Okay, so here in the Facebook comment section, Dr. Pam, it's a mixture of comments and questions. So I'll just emphasize if it's a comment or a question. For comment from Ms. Onyang Mosaso, I agree with Dr. Cajilig that we should listen to the people who are greatly affected by the problem to offer more culturally responsive and gender responsive solutions. Yes, indeed. Because initially it was just focusing on women, correct, Dr. Pam? And then later on, it's more inclusive. You've addressed the problems of physically challenged individuals, the PWD, and then here comes the LGBTQ community. So very, very inclusive. So we like the transformation, very transformative because it's participatory design. There's a question, Dr. Pam. So here it is. How do you approach issues of power dynamics when working with grassroots communities? Although you mentioned this a while back, but can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, you really have to take the time to know the community well before doing an intervention. And what a lot of LGUs do para makatipid, it's like this one-time, big-time, multi-stakeholder meeting, no? But just putting different people with different perspectives, with different positions of power in one room does not guarantee collaboration or participation. So really get to know the community well, know what the tensions are in the community before putting everyone in a room. So I really recommend doing smaller consultations first, and really separating the people who hold power in the community. Because, like, for example, and a lot of people doing social work and community development know this, na pag nagpasok ka ng barangay official in a consultation with women, no, na wala naman talagang position of power in barangay, then they will probably just say yes, no, or agree with the official because they're also politically vulnerable, no? Natatakot sila na pag nag-disagree sila, hindi sila bigyan ng ayuda. So we really need to be careful when we put people together in rooms and really understand their relationships with each other, the potential points of tensions, so that we can manage it in advance.
Okay, thank you. So you just established rapport. Siguro you made a house visit, no, Doc Pam, to really get to know the community. So very psikolohiyang Pilipino yung approach nila, Doc Pam. Now, there's another question, Doc Pam, from Miss Ronda Chavez. So how do you, you've already answered this, sorry. From Mr. Anthony Gillier Urbano, paano nakakatulong ang isang design anthropologist like you sa mga lugar na nakaka-experience ng unti-unting bumababa ang lupa or subsidence? Kagaya sa Bulacan, I'm from Bulacan, na kailangan na nilang gumamit ng bangka dahil lumulubog na po sa tubig ang barangay nila. Hindi naman ako kasama doon. In 10 years po, into the future's thinking, kung hindi mag-improve ang rate ng subsidence, 1 meter po ang subsidence sa lugar nila. So, essentially, ang tanong po, paano po nakakatulong ang tulad nyo, isang design anthropologist, tungkol sa issue ng subsidence?
Magandang tanong yan kasi ang PhD field site ko is Manila Bay, Bulacan in particular, specifically architecture for land subsidence, no? So ako, on my own, as a design anthropologist, medyo mahirap kasi nga systemic ang disaster eh. So what I do is really kailangan i-link up mo ang architects and yung barangay council din kailangan, no? Kasi kailangan malaman kung ano ang gusto nilang mangyari. And for the barangays na I worked with, barangay members that I worked with sa Bulacan, medyo hati sila. There are people who want to stay, and there are people who are open to leaving. But of course, whether you stay or you leave, kailangan nito ng resources. So ako, as a design anthropologist, ang nagawa ko during my PhD is to facilitate these conversations between local leaders and, for example, architects and engineers para mas maintindihan ng communities kung ano yung possibilities. Ngayon may nagtanong, no, kung ano yung limitations din ng this type of work. Ako, ang isang realization ko, nag-start ako sa Yolanda 10 years ago, puro community work ang ginagawa ko. Ang na-realize ko in that work, ang kulang sa work ko is really the policy focus. So that's what I'm trying to address now. Kasi pag hindi mo na-connect yung community sa policy, wala kang resources para gawin yung gusto mo. So what I'm trying to do now, meron akong isang malaking project na Southeast Asia on policy advocacy for climate and health. Kasi we have to work at the problem at different scales. So kailangan yung at the level of the community, Pero you have to work at the highest levels of decision making as well to make sure that the resources are funneled appropriately, and that the concerns at the community level have representation at, for example, national and regional level.
Thank you, Dr. Pam. Yes, I agree. Systemic dapat yung support, and this should come from policy review, policy development, and policy implementation. There's another question from Mr. Osborne. Sa design anthropology experts, are there any projects or proposals to create easily recognizable hazard symbols that can warn people of natural hazards like earthquakes, tsunamis, landslides, floods, volcanic eruptions, etc., regardless of language or culture? What are your thoughts about this, ma'am? Thank you.
Yeah, so
Symbols.
I'm quite active on Twitter/X. Isa yan sa mga hugot ko every time na pumapatak yung habagat is we need better ways to communicate. No, I also came from the communication industry. That was my first career. So I feel very strongly about this. Kailangan talaga ng more understandable symbols, no, na maalala kaagad. Dun sa regardless of language and culture, I would challenge that kasi kailangan mas localized din yung mga ginagamit nating symbols, di ba? So it's not my area now, but there are people who are not necessarily disaster anthropologists but work in disaster communication. I know one Filipino communication specialist based in UP Mindanao who just launched a book on disaster communication for GIDA areas. Tingnan natin, no, kung I believe it's open source. So if you Google it, his name is 𝗪𝙁. Let me type it in the chat.
Yes, okay. So while waiting for that name, GIDA po is geographically isolated disadvantaged area. Yun po yung gustong sabihin ni Dr. Pam. Okay, so while waiting also, so makita natin na merong call for universal hazard symbols, and also in-emphasize din ni Dr. Pam na there also be a localized hazard symbols kasi iba-iba naman talaga ang mga hazards na nararamdaman natin. Okay. I think you can multitask, Dr. Pam. No? There's another question if you may. Okay po, opo. So, from Miss Abigail Gonzalez. Hello po, Doc Pam. Thank you for your sharing. It's so inspiring as well as informative on how designing is so crucial for communities. I would like to ask for how can universities or schools collaborate with local communities? So extension na to, Dr. Pam, no? Extension activities, real-world learning experiences in participatory design.
Yeah. Good question. That is exactly what I'm trying to do in my work at the UP College of Architecture. Na for each course that I teach, dapat meron talaga siyang engagement with the community. Ang isang angle na madaling gawin ito, which we've experimented with sa UP College of Architecture, is through yung service, ano yun? Civil service, hindi civil service. Community service, no, na program ng university, 'di ba? That's required for all college students, and a lot of and that intrinsically requires engagement with communities. So ginawa namin yan sa College of Architecture sa UP in, I think it was 2022. So at that time, I was working with the World Wildlife Fund USA Department of Disaster and Environment. So we were able to bring in experts to conduct training for nature-based solutions. Nagsama kami primarily for professionals, pero nagsama kami ng mga 30 students to do that, para makascade nila to communities yung importance ng nature-based solutions. And then what we're doing now with the British Council is, of course, a university-led effort in futures thinking for climate resilience. Of course, none of this is possible without resources. So ako kasi, I really go out of my way to look for grants to apply for so I can do this for my classes. And there are a lot. I mean, I'm pretty much able to do this every year. There are many grants out there na tig $3,000, $2,500. Pinapatos ko lahat yon. So I can do things for my classes. So be creative in trying to find funds for this so you can do this type of work.
Yes, kahit malit naman yung pondo, meron din pong mararating. Hindi po ba? So, tanong po ni Jan Osborne, sino po yung UP Mindanao expert, ma'am? Nasabi po niyo dito sa...
Tinype ko dun sa private chat kasi hindi ko ma-access yung comments. Maybe someone can cut and paste. Yeah.
Okay, our tech team will copy that and paste that in the chat box. It's actually 𝗪𝙀𝗻𝘀, disaster communication for geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. Now, there's another comment, Dr. Pam. So STEAM from Miss Celia Balbin. STEAM is probably the simplest form of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary movement. What do you see as the future of university academics? What do you see would be the forms of the courses, degree programs, and micro courses? Para naman mas marami pang design anthropologists and future courses, Doc Pam.
Yeah, I really see, and I hope not to see more interdisciplinary work, even interdisciplinary departments coming out of the university. I mean, admittedly, not across the Philippines, maraming siloed universities, no? Especially the older ones na talagang per discipline. I'll give an example. My department at RMIT in Melbourne was a disaster design and development program offered by an architecture school. So architecture pero nagdi-disaster, nagde-development din, no? And then design. And in our department, because I was also teaching there, of course it was an architecture department. So we had architects and urban planners, but we also had historians as part of our department. Myself representing the social scientists and anthropologists. We also had a social worker. We had lawyers. Some of that is already happening in the universities around us, but that really has to be driven from the top. Kasi kung walang incentives for faculty to interact with each other and engage with other disciplines, mahirap talaga for faculty na to do this on their own time. So kailangan talaga ng institutional support for this to happen.
Thank you, Dr. Pam. Yes, institutional support to be able to develop courses for this area. So I think we don't have any more questions. So, well, from the conversation or from the presentation of Dr. Pam, no, nakita ko, Doc Pam, na yung di ba, when you interviewing or requesting the women in the household, parang pinigilan kayo ng mga male, siguro mga father yon or kung sino man. Actually, malaki talaga yung role ng mga kababaihan when it comes to design. Like for example, when we had our house renovated 2 years ago, and there's this contractor, kasama niya yung wife niya. And then yung wife was actually very accommodating sa mga requests ko. And sometimes nakakalimutan ko, nire-remind niya ako, Mami, baka gusto mo may ganito para dito sa mga bata. So sabi ko, ang ganda ng combination. So dapat talaga kasama talaga yung mga kababaihan. And that actually reminded me when you share it with us. So sana talaga, no, marami pa talagang mga kababaihan when it comes to design thinking, innovation, leading in resilience. So thank you for that, and marami po tayong nanonood. Marami pong mga kabataan na nanonood ngayon. So sana magkaroon pa rin ng maraming katulad mo. Okay. There's one more question po pala from Miss Abigail Gonzalez, and that will be flashed on screen. Hello again, Doc Pam. One more question po. Have you worked on any projects related to designing schools or learning environments? Ang ganda ng question, no, na parang kukunti yung alam kong mga design schools. If so, can you share some insights or key takeaways from those experiences?
Okay. In terms of designing schools, wala pa masyado. Although, yung sa futures thinking work ko, parang nagkakaroon ako ng idea on the kinds of classrooms that we need, no, to facilitate this kind of work. Na parang yung classroom setup ngayon na parang lahat ng estudyante nakalinya, nakaharap, tapos yung teacher nasa gitna. parang feeling ko it really doesn't encourage collaborative work among students, and yung flow din of knowledge, it becomes very very one way. So parang ako, I envision siguro more classrooms na mas workshop rather than parang auditorium style. Merong niluluto ngayon, to my understanding. Hindi ko muna sasabihin kung aling institution, but there is I believe a UN-funded effort in the country that will come out soon. I was tapped to be possibly involved. So siguro pag nabuo na ulit yung project, mag-usap ulit tayo sa ganitong forum so we can discuss.
Okay.
But
Doc Pam, halimbawa gustong makipag-connect sa'yo, makipag-collaborate, how will they reach you or contact you, Dr. Pam?
Yes, at the end of my presentation is my email address. I'm just based in UP. I'm based in Quezon City. I do travel a lot for my work, but I'm mostly based in Quezon City. I'm just around. I'm active on social media. You can, if you're part of Twitter or X, you can look me up there, or you can if anyone wants my email, you can ask it from the organizers.
Okay, so that was a great discussion. Thank you, Dr. Cajilig, and to all those who participated in the question and answer session. We will now present a certificate of appreciation to Dr. Pamela Cajilig, a design anthropologist. Gusto ko, ma'am, yung design anthropologist. Gusto ko yung label na yun. Let me call Dr. Sherilyn C. Monterola, UP NISMED Director, and Ms. Madeline Michelle D. John, Press, Cultural, and Human Rights Officer from the Austrian Embassy, Manila, to join us on our virtual stage. Please allow me to read the contents of the certificate. Austrian Embassy, Manila, University of the Philippines, Diliman, and University National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development awards the Certificate of Appreciation to Pamela G. Cajilig for sharing her time, knowledge, expertise, and insights as a resource speaker during the 4th Women in STEAM webinar with the theme, Empowering Women in STEAM, Innovating, Adapting, and Leading with Resilience, held on 21st of March 2025. Signed, Ms. Madeline Michelle D. John, Press, Cultural, and Human Rights Officer, Austrian Embassy, Manila. Prof. Dr. Sherilyn C. Monterola, Director, UP NISMED.
Thank you, UP NISMED, and thank you to our audience. Ang gaganda ng mga tanong niyo.
Yes, po. Thank you very much, Dr. Pamela. And thank you for joining us virtually, Dr. Sher and Ms. Madeline.
Thank you.
Now, maybe let's just batiin po natin yung ating mga virtual participants sa ating Facebook at sa ating YouTube while waiting for our next activity. So we have, kindly key in the place you're tuning in from. So a while back I've mentioned, dami pong taga Isabela, no? Salamat po sa suporta ninyo. And also we have from, let me check here. So yes, from Miss Florence Asinas. Good afternoon, watching from Muñoz National High School, Maine Senior High School, Muñoz, Quezon City po ba ito? Okay, let's have another from Miss Laika Lix Chavez, watching from Calapan, Maria Estrella PVG Tawiran Elementary School. And we also have from Patricia Nicole Balbin, from Araling Panlipunan Department. O diba, hindi lang tayo pang Science, Technology, Engineering, Agriculture, Anthropology, Mathematics, pero pang Araling Panlipunan din tayo. Of course, diba po yung topic kanina ni Dr. Pam, pwede nyo pong i-relate yon while discussing local geography, specifically the Region 8. No? from Cepalay City National High School, Cepalay City, Negros Occidental. Maraming salamat po. Happy afternoon mga kabayan. Kaabyanan. Okay. Kaabyanan po ba ay kababaihan? Okay. Happy Women's Month. Okay. Patapos na po no, next week, patapos ng ating Women's Month. Pero marami pa rin pong mga activities ang university, hindi lang po ang aming institution. From Lailani Florendo, good afternoon po. Watching from Daramuangan Integrated School, STO La Union. Okay, ang ating mga Ilocano mga participants. Okay? We also have from San Jose del Monte, Bulacan, my town, Josel Abdon Peña. Hello, Ma'am Josel. Tingin naman tayo ng mga comments ng ating mga participants regarding the first presentation. Okay? Sabi ni Ma'am Rina Basilan Mamaril, very informative. I am impressed and grateful from Quezon City Math Department College Instructor. 2013 ba? Tama ba ang Yolanda? 2013 or 2014. And then after 9 to 10 years, we have this presentation. Diba? Very informative nga talaga. Kasi hindi naman natin nakita paano talaga nag-recover. Wala talagang may mga napapanood tayo, pero from design anthropologists, ito yung kanyang lente. Kaya yes, I agree with you, ma'am. We also have let's have another comment. Okay. From Miss Celia Balbin. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Pam Cajilig. That was a deep dive into a lot of things we are working on now as educators. Disaster resilience, design thinking, futures thinking. Your presentation is proof that these work and that there's reason for pursuing STEM and its various mutations. Yes. Maaari kasing nakakalito pa ito sa ating mga kabataan, no? Yung mga nagpo-pursue pa ng mga, namimili sila kung ano bang course ang kanilang pipiliin para sa college degree. Actually po, kukunti pa rin po ang nag-STEM, no, ng mga women. And we really need that to increase our innovation index in the global ranking. No? Hindi lang naman po yung iba't ibang assessment. May innovation index din tayo dyan. And to increase our innovation index, the heart of innovation is STEM. And women can increase that ranking. Okay. We still have another, let's read some comments more from, I'll check on that. Okay. Watching from Benguet State University, magsha-shoutout muna po tayo, no? From Laini, tama ba ma'am, ang aking pagka-pronounce, Masyong Plansa. Okay, shout out muna tayo coming from Olongapo City, Joe Mar Navarro. Yan. Hi, Sir Joe. Now, from Pasay naman, okay? This is Jelaya Jomok Alcasoda. Hello, Jelaya. Hindi pa ba ako nabanggit dito na bago? Okay, from Tacloban City. PB Lalane, and also here from Arellano University. Okay, I missed that name, but your name is on screen. Okay, yan, from Tacloban City. We also have, okay, meron din po tayo sa YouTube. Okay. From Maureen Lamsen, ang ganda ng kanyang ng comment. Thank you so much, Doc Pam. I really learn a lot and appreciate your talk. I hope I can also inspire my students to exhibit design thinking in my class. Yes, lalo na geographically, we have a lot of disasters. And just recently, sabi ng isang industry expert, so there's actually an projected increase of investors. They're actually eyeing Philippines as one of the hubs for their manufacturing company. And of course, we need to really capacitate our future workforce. Kasama mga kababaihan dyan. Okay? And then, we also have, okay, so let's have a 10-minute virtual coffee break po, and then we'll resume at 3:37. Again, welcome to our fourth Women in STEAM with the theme Empowering Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, Agriculture, and we have added Anthropology and Mathematics, Innovating, Adapting, and Leading with Resilience. Now, we move on to our second speaker. Our speaker is an esteemed scientist from Austria, whose expertise has significantly contributed to advancement of STEM fields. To further introduce our speaker, let me call on again Ms. Madeline Michelle 𝗪𝙤𝙤. Ma'am.
Fortunate indeed to have our speaker join us live all the way from Vienna, Austria. Ms. Kaye History Museum, Vienna, delves into textiles from a variety of periods and regions. First, to the detailed reconstructions of ancient textiles using advanced techniques such as structure of fibers and trace elements of mordants used in dyes. Valuable insights into the technological aspects of textile production. These days, patterns in textile technologies across different cultures and time periods. In her work, Kaye is actively involved in reconstructing historical textiles and clothing to better understand past identities. Sharing her findings with the public, addressing important contemporary issues in the textile. She introduced us to the fascinating world of textiles, both Asian
I'm sorry. Is it clear now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, Ms. Nads, can you please introduce again Ms. Kaye?
Okay, I'm very sorry about that. All right. I was introducing Kaye. She is a textile archaeologist whose work spans both ancient and contemporary worlds of textiles. Kaye graduated from the University of Vienna with a degree in prehistory and historical archaeology and is currently pursuing her master's in the same field. She conducts research at the Archaeological Textiles Lab at the Natural History Museum, Vienna, where she delves into textiles from a variety of periods and regions. Her expertise ranges from the study of raw fibers to the detailed reconstructions of ancient textiles using advanced techniques such as scanning electron microscopy to analyze the structure of fibers and trace elements of mordants used in dyes. Through her extensive research, Kaye has contributed to the creation of large data sets that offer valuable insights into the technological aspects of textile production. These data sets allow for deep, meaningful statistical analysis across different cultures and time periods. In addition to her laboratory work, Kaylee is actively involved in experimental and public archaeology, reconstructing historical textiles and clothing to better understand past identities. She is also passionate about sharing her findings with the public, addressing important contemporary issues in the textile industry, including its environmental and social impacts. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my good friend, Miss Kaylee Saunderson, as she introduces to the fascinating world of textiles, both ancient and modern, and their role in shaping our past and present. Kaylee, the floor is now yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, thank you so much, Madeline, and thank you everyone for having me here. I'm honored to speak here today. I'm just trying to see, can you see my presentation? Okay, here it is. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is women in archaeology, and more specifically textile archaeology. We're going to have a look at those a little bit. And what you can see here in the middle, maybe some of you know her, it's the Venus of Willendorf. She is stunning 30,000 years old, and in Austria she's very well known, and she's actually exhibited at the Natural History Museum Vienna. If you ever come to Vienna, I would really recommend getting a look at her. And on the left you see some of the textiles I study. Those are almost 3,000 years old. So what even is archaeology? So it's a very, very big field, and in general it deals with the study of human history through material remains, usually found through excavations in the ground. So we can deal with bones, both human and animal, because animal husbandry is of course a big topic. Botanical remains such as pollen or wood. Of course, a lot of artifacts, most of them are pottery, but we also have a lot of tools and jewelry. Then also things like landscapes, how humans interacted with them and changed them. Religious practices, most of these are burials, which we find quite often. And the environments, how climate changes, ADNA can tell us a lot, but also practical experiments like reconstructions. So it's a very diverse, interdisciplinary field, and you can specialize in just about everything. You can become a food archaeologist, a wood archaeologist, a metal archaeologist, or specialize in specific time periods. And this allows us to understand human behavior from 300,000 years ago, from the first Homo sapiens until today. So this is a very, very, very big time span, and a lot has changed during these years, of course. But what's interesting is that we can always see the human. We can always somehow identify with the humanity. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the time periods we have in Central Europe. Of course, they're quite different in the Philippines, but here we study the Paleo and Mesolithic from 300,000 years ago to 7,000 years ago around. So these are the hunter-gatherers who had no animal husbandry, no agriculture. This only starts with the Neolithic, where people start building large houses. They have pottery, they have fields, they have animals like cows. Then during the Bronze Age, we have the first stratification of society. So we can see very rich people, maybe something like kings and queens, but also a lot of war. We have the first castles, we have swords. Then in the Iron Age, it goes even further. We have the first cities during this time, and as the name says, we have tools made out of iron. Then the Roman period, some of you might know, this is the time of Julius Caesar, for example. We have a very complex society already. We have coins that are used. This culture comes from the Italic Peninsula. And the early Middle Ages in Central Europe is quite complex. We have many different cultures, but where I am, at least in Austria, it's the Avar period. This is a culture that comes from Central Asia, and they are partly nomadic. Then the High and Late Middle Ages, here we have Christianity in Austria, and we still have a lot of buildings from this time, such as you can see the Stephansdom, which is a very well-known building in Vienna. Then the modern period is characterized by the Habsburg in Austria, the ruling dynasty, but also towards the end we have the World Wars, of course, and also this is part of archaeology up until recent history and today. So what do actually archaeologists do? What does our daily life look like? Well, also this can be quite diverse. We do work in the fields. This can be hard work with shovels really digging into the ground, or more delicate work with very small finds such as textiles. But it can also be underwater even. You need a special training for this, of course. But also here we can find a lot of archaeology, also in the Philippines. Then we do science communication. So this can be at events, presenting the research, which is also often funded by the public. But we also communicate it to other scientists at conferences, where we also learn about others' cutting-edge research. But we also work in labs. For example, with textiles, we do this a lot with microscopes to understand how exactly these were produced. And in my case, I also went to the Philippines last November to communicate the research on textiles, but also learn a lot from the weavers who have a lot of traditions which are long dead in Central Europe, but are still practiced there today. So it's a bit different from what you might know from famous archaeology protagonists such as Lara Croft. We don't use guns or anything like that, but it can be quite adventurous. And what I left out, most of the time we sit in libraries in front of our laptops, reading about research and writing about it. So now to my field of textile archaeology. So like other archaeological topics, we look at textiles usually from the ground. These were a very important material in daily life from the Neolithic onwards, and they still are today. We really can't imagine a world without textiles nowadays. They're everywhere, of course, as clothing, but also in our homes, in our cars. We can't get rid of textiles, you can say. So we look at the textile remains themselves, as you can see here, mineralized onto metal from a burial on jewelry, and also with the tools which are more commonly preserved, such as spindle whorls, which are used to twist threads, or also loom weights, and so on. Because textiles are quite rarely preserved, you need special conditions, because they usually just deteriorate in the ground. And we also look at clothing in general, and this is a very large, interesting topic, because textiles here in clothing are the most important materials for showing identity, just like today. And historically, textile production is often dominated by women. This is also an idea of modern society, but it's actually not exclusive to women. We have quite a lot of cultures where it's a man's domain. For example, in ancient Egypt, textiles, weaving and spinning was done by men. And also sometimes in the 20th and 19th century, a lot of men were involved in textiles. So it's not necessarily a female craft. But there were a lot of changes in the textile industry and for women working in it during the 19th century, because machines started taking over a lot of the work, and that left a lot of people, a lot of women at that time, without work, staying at home. So through industrialization, especially in Europe, a lot of the knowledge is now lost. And we as scientists, we have to learn a lot from people who still practice this today, such as in the Balkans in Europe or Southeast Asia, where people still weave textiles by hand. And this is not just all for fun that we do. It actually has an impact for modern society, especially because the modern textile industry is one of the most polluting industries out of all. And this is mostly due to fast fashion, because we want to have new clothing all the time. When something's out of fashion, we pretty much throw it away, even though it's still functional. And there's also the social aspect, because 80% of modern garment workers are women, and many experience exploitation and violation of rights. So this is also relevant to this topic. And we can learn from history, not just the technology in the production, but also how the textiles are reused and how they changed women's lives. For example, here on the right, you can see a 2,600-year-old textile from Hallstatt with a nice little patch sewn on. And this shows us, it's just one of many examples, that textiles were repaired. They weren't just thrown out when they were no longer perfect and in shape. They just repaired them as far as it was possible. And we can also see throughout history and prehistory that textile working women were valued a lot. They were shown in elaborate pictures. And this is something we might think about today. And we also look a lot about the identity expression through clothing, which hasn't really changed over tens of thousands of years. And with this, we talk about a kind of anti-fast fashion. So here are some examples of reconstructions of prehistoric clothing from the Bronze Age, 4,000 years ago, to the late Iron Age, 2,500 years ago. And contrary to what many people think, it's not just ugly brown rags or furs, it's beautiful, colorful clothing with very elaborate jewelry. So this shows us people have always wanted to look beautiful, to express themselves through clothing and demonstrate their status. So I'd like to show you an example from our research at the Natural History Museum Vienna. The site is Hallstatt, and it's excavated by the museum since the 19th century. And this is one of the most important prehistoric sites in Europe. There's also a whole time period, the early Iron Age, named after Hallstatt. Some of you might find this picture familiar of Hallstatt. It's a very popular tourist destination nowadays, and it also inspired the village in Frozen. But what we want to look at is what's in the mountain. So salt was excavated here over 3,000 years ago. And this was a very, very valuable material for the conservation of food before they had fridges, of course. So in these salt mines, we find textiles and other organic materials such as wood, which would normally deteriorate, in an excellent preservation because the salt is so toxic to microorganisms. So they look almost like new, they're flexible, they still have the colors. So this is an excellent source for textile research. And for example, we find pieces of sacks and ropes, which were used to pull up the salt from the salt mines. These are all from the Bronze Age, around 3,000 years old. So this is what we could imagine as a scene during the Bronze Age 3,000 years ago of the workers in the mountain. We see women, children, men, everyone working on it. And here are some later examples from the Iron Age, about 2,700 years old. And here we see a really developed textile culture. It's much more elaborate than in the Bronze Age. We have many more colors, a lot of patterns, very, very fine textiles, very colorful, and some techniques that are quite unknown nowadays, such as tablet weaving. You can see on the bottom right. I'll say more on that in a bit. And what we also ask is, who were the producers? So for the Iron Age, most likely it was mostly women working on textiles. We know this through some few images of the time. We can see women spinning, women weaving, and we can also see this in other periods. Like for example, in the late Middle Ages, we see women spinning a lot. And these are women from all places in society. Definitely poorer women, of course, did it as well, but also the very rich ones. So now on tablet weaving. This is a technique that is widely unknown nowadays, especially in Central Europe. It's still practiced in some regions, such as Indonesia. It's a technique using small wooden, usually plates, which are threaded, and you can then turn them forwards or backwards. And then with different colors, you can create beautiful patterns, such as this 𝗪𝗪𝗏 pattern. And during the Iron Age, this was a very popular technique. And it didn't really have any practical function. It was purely decorative, usually for clothing. And it's very difficult to learn, takes a very long time. So this just shows us that people really had specialists who did this probably all day, had no other work, just to make clothing more beautiful. And we, as experimental archaeologists, try to recreate these patterns, of course. What we also look at in textile archaeology are the fibers. And for this, we usually use a scanning electron microscope, so we can see the surfaces of the fibers really well. And we can differentiate, for example, plant fibers and animal fibers. So here on the top left, we can see some flax, some plant fibers. And this can be identified by the small nodes you can see. It looks a bit like bamboo. And on the bottom right, we have sheep's wool. This was a very popular fiber in Central Europe, where it gets quite cold in winter. And this we can identify by these small scales. So here are some examples of other 𝗪𝗪𝗏 tablet weaves and their reconstructions. So they used really beautiful patterns, lovely colors, and used it, for example, as the borders on sleeves. And together with the weavers at Harvest Baguio in the Philippines, we recreated one of the new finds of these tablet woven bands. And in just a few days, the weavers actually learned how to weave the pattern. So this shows us it's really important to work with weavers who still know the crafts. And even though these were not specialist tablet weavers, they were weavers and they have a good feeling for threads, I would say. We also have gold and glamour in prehistory, another argument against the brown rags. So these are a bit over 3,000 years old from the Bronze Age, found close to Vienna. There are multiple examples of these. The bundles of gold threads, and most likely these decorated the clothing of a priest, for example, or a very high-standing person. And we also did some experiments on this, incorporating it into fabrics, into bands, to understand how these threads were brought into the fabric. And what we also see a lot throughout prehistory and history is the recycling of fabrics. So if textiles were no longer usable as clothing, could no longer be repaired, they were still used in other areas. For example, also in metal technology. So from the late Iron Age, we have a lot of examples of textiles found in these hollow bronze bracelets. And this was simply to provide more stability in the metal so that it doesn't get dented. And this is a beautiful example from Slovakia, which is right east of Austria. And we have some traces of wonderful embroidery from a bit over 2,000 years ago. So who are the textile archaeologists today? I'm just going to present you some big names in research nowadays. There's Karina Grömer, my supervisor. She's the director of the prehistory department in Vienna. Then there's Eva Andersson-Strand. She's in Copenhagen. She's a professor. Agata Ulonowska is also a professor in Warsaw in Poland. Margherita Gleber is a professor in textile archaeology in Padua in Italy. Then two other in Copenhagen are Marie-Louise Nosch and Elsa Ivanes, and Ulla Mannering. She's a research professor at the National Museum of Denmark. So you can see it's very dominated by women, which is a wonderful thing. And yeah, also throughout history, it was mostly women working in textile archaeology. One of the first was Martha Hoffmann. She did a lot of experimental archaeology in Norway, especially on the weaving tools. And she worked together with local traditional weavers who were still practicing this craft and trying to reconstruct the ancient prehistoric techniques with the looms. But now to women in archaeology in general. One of the trailblazers was Johanna Mesdorf. She was from northern Germany, and she had no academic education, but a very strong interest in prehistory. You also have to think back then, it wasn't that typical for women to study at university. It was very rare. She was the first woman in Germany to be hired as an archaeologist still, and she then later became a museum director in Kiel in northern Germany. She's known as Germany's first female archaeologist, and she opened the discipline for women there. Another very interesting personality is Princess Marie of Windisch-Grätz. She's an Austrian-German noblewoman born in the 19th century. She separated from her husband in 1900, and then in 1905 she began working as an archaeologist. She was very strongly criticized by male archaeologists. You have to think it was very unusual to see a woman working in the field during that time, but thankfully she was supported by the emperor and was able to lead excavations. And she worked in Hallstatt, the site we saw before with the salt mines, at the burial site, and excavated 45 graves there herself and with the workers. And she was actually doing the active work also from 9 a.m. until sunset. So here are some pictures of her working in the field. And this is a very famous find you see on the right. It's a piece of armor from the Iron Age, around 2,500 years old, which was found by her. So now to some statistics. So as I've said, it was very untypical for women to study at university, also study archaeology, of course, with that, but it's become more and more common, thankfully. And nowadays, there's actually more women finishing their diplomas and PhDs in archaeology. But there's also some not so nice statistics. Right now, there's an exhibition at the University of Vienna called archaeosexism. And there were some studies done on how women and diverse people and men are treated in the field of archaeology. And this survey has shown that over half of women have experienced some kind of discrimination in their field during the studies or work. So this is something that we definitely have to work on in German-speaking countries. But it's getting better if we compare with the 19th century, of course. So men should definitely be supportive and aware of their privileges. But in general, the advice I'd like to give to aspiring archaeologists is find a program in archaeology or prehistory at a university. For example, at the University of the Philippines, you can study archaeology. And you can also combine this with other fields in science, such as biology, chemistry, physics, pretty much anything, sociology, anthropology, because it's such a diverse field and you can specialize in almost everything. You can combine it with almost everything. Then I recommend finding a mentor in the topic you're interested in. And this person doesn't have to be in the Philippines. For example, you could find them over the internet at conferences and just contact them per email. You should follow your own scientific path, find your own interests, but also stay flexible. So take on as many opportunities as you can that come your way, but also see that there are other possible ways you can go. So you might find new scientific interest through this. And it's very, very important that you find and build networks. This can be through conferences, through projects. And in these conferences, you don't even have to have your own presentation. You can just join it and listen to the others, get talking to people, build your network. And to get into research, to learn more about topics, I can really recommend some online resources like JSTOR, Academia, and ResearchGate. You can find a lot of research here for free. And for women as institutions, I can recommend organizing events such as this one to increase awareness, to support women in science, and also to fund specific grants which support women, hire more female scientists in leading roles, and allow flexible working hours and home office, because of course it's in our societies, it's more typical for women to take on the role of caring for children, and then it can be quite difficult with the work hours that are often required. And I'd like to show one example of a wonderful network we have here in Europe. It's called Euroweb, Europe Through Textiles, and it was a cost action from 2020 to 2024. And it brought all of the textile researchers from different fields in Europe together. And they funded workshops, conferences, mobility grants, and training schools. But what was most valuable, all these people got to know each other, created a lot more research. So it was valuable in a personal sense, but also for science itself. And there are 4 different working groups. We have one on textile technology, one on clothing identities, one on textile and clothing terminology, so the words used throughout history, and one on the sociological aspect of textiles. So what does it take to become an archaeologist? Definitely a very strong interest. It's not a job you do to get a lot of money, I'll say it as it is. It's something you do because you love doing it. You need to do a lot of independent work because the university itself, it doesn't give you enough resources for your specialization. You really have to do that yourself, get reading, find your topic. It takes a lot of persistency to stay in the field and a lot of adaptation because they're very different working environments and it's sometimes difficult to get in specific projects. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, Salamat, or in German, danke, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kaylee. It is fascinating to hear your journey of weaving together the threads of history and science through your work in textile archaeology. I am sure our audience today would like to know more about your journey and your field of expertise. At this point, let's take a moment for a question and answer session. Ms. Kaylee, if you have any questions, please type them in the Facebook or YouTube comments section. We can accommodate 3 to 4 questions from our online participants. Now I'm checking the comments. So again, it's a mixture of comments and question. I'll let you know if it's a comment or a question. Just a comment from Miss Mary Ann Gina Valderrama watching via YouTube. Hello, Miss Mary Ann. The Philippines has a rich history of weaving from north to south of our country. It's a comment. Yes, actually, we have this one of the Filipino weaving techniques. It's called 𝗪𝗲, H-A-B-I. There's a question from Miss Alani Limbaco. Okay, so just a general question. What are some obstacles as a woman in archaeology, given that this can be a male-dominant industry seen by society? Of course, you've mentioned this a while back, but can you please elaborate on obstacles you've encountered and you've observed from your colleagues?
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you. Yes, it can still nowadays be quite difficult. There's a lot of conservative views sometimes. Some are very progressive, but there's still some men who are very conservative. And you feel it a lot in the field of academia. I think that's in all topics, that the men have a lot of power, use that power against women and take on more of the old-fashioned roles. But we also feel it a lot in the excavations themselves. There's a lot of manual labor, but there's also a lot of work like documentation of writing. And I've experienced in many cases that people just say, oh, the shoveling is the men's work and the writing is the women's work. But women are just as capable of excavating themselves. So this is something where we feel the drift a lot.
Okay, so in preparation, if you would really like to proceed, take what's this, a archaeology as your career, maybe just a recommendation for the others is maybe that's a lot of work out just to prepare yourself for the excavation, you know?
Yes, it of course depends. People only do excavations. They do that as a full-time job. Some people only do it during their studies, but you can't go past it. You have to go on an excavation someday.
Yes, yes. Okay, there's another question, second question from Miss Rina Basilan Mamaril. Okay, So this is my first time attending a seminar like this, textile archaeology. Yes, this is actually the first time. It just sounds very interesting to me. Can this be related to the world of fashion design? Miss Kaye?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for your interest. Yes, it can definitely be related to the world of fashion design, 100%. And together with Katrina Grömer, my boss at the Natural History Museum, for example, we do historical fashion shows. We just had one in January at the University of Padua with hundreds of people watching, showing these prehistoric costumes. And also sometimes the historical costumes influence the modern fashion industry. We see a lot of that. For example, in Versace, we've seen some of it. And many people start wearing some of these elements also in their everyday clothing, also tablet weaving. I've seen people wear them as belts nowadays. So it's wonderful to see how they influence each other.
Okay, so there's another 2 questions. In the interest of time, I will just entertain 2 questions, but we will forward your questions to Miss Kaye for the incoming question. So this is from Dorothy Mananghaya, watching via YouTube. She's taking a Master of Arts in Asian Studies, student from Asian Center here in UP Diliman. Okay. What strategies are being implemented today to ensure gender equity in archaeological research and leadership?
Yeah, so here, as I said, for institutions, it would be great to get more funding for grants, specifically for women and diverse genders. But also events like this, specific working groups which deal with this topic, and even very small events at the institutions themselves, just showing the problems that we have, also to create awareness in men. I think many men in the discipline don't really think about it. And here we had this exhibition at the University of Vienna, which I think will help a lot to at least create some awareness.
So more on this.
Yes.
Yes.
Because,
Okay.
to do some workshops on gender discrimination in these institutions.
Okay, we have one last question. I hope I can pronounce it correctly. From John Osborne. Guten Tag. You mentioned that clothes indicate identity. In what ways, archaeologically speaking, is identity inferred from clothes? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question. So we can see it not only through the textiles themselves, which are quite rare, but we usually look at graves for this topic. We have a lot of graves throughout prehistory, hundreds of thousands, and we can see in pre-Christian times in Central Europe that they wore a lot of jewelry or other clothing components made of metal, which are very well preserved. And you can see specific clothing elements probably show specific statuses in society. Very richly adorned people were probably very high standing. They used also gold, for example. We can also see some patterns in the placement of these objects, specific objects, which show us this was probably some specific group in society, some political group, ethnical group. We didn't know because they had no writing. And this was probably a visual coding of these people to identify each other. But as I said, nowadays it's very difficult to know. But if we think of textiles, definitely some colors indicated identity, where someone came from, what their status is, or we can also think of something like wedding rings, the relationship status. That is something we can also think of in prehistory, just like nowadays.
Thank you, Ms. Kaye. That concludes our second Q&A session. And we will now award the Certificate of Appreciation to Ms. Kaye. Let me call again Prof. Dr. Sherilyn C. Monterola, our director, and Ms. Madeline Michelle Dijan from Austrian Embassy to join us on virtual stage. Please allow me to, just waiting for Prof. Dr. Sherilyn. Okay. Please allow me to read the contents of the certificate. Austrian Embassy Manila, University of the Philippines, and the National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development awards a certificate of appreciation to Ms. Keylie Sanderson for sharing her time, knowledge, expertise, and insights as a resource speaker during the 4th Women in STEAM webinar with the theme Empowering Women in STEAM, Innovating, Adapting, and Leading with Resilience, held on the 21st of March 2025, signed by Ms. Madeline Michelle E. John and Prof. Dr. Sherilyn C. Monterola. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Kaye. Ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the end of our event, it is my pleasure to call on our brilliant and innovative and pretty director of UP NISMED, Prof. Dr. Sherilyn C. Monterola, who will be delivering the closing remarks. Let's give her a warm virtual round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we wrap up this insightful webinar for the 4th Women in STEAM celebration, it is crucial to recognize the importance of broadening opportunities for women, as well as disseminating trailblazing initiatives in interdisciplinary fields relating to STEAM. Systematic barriers continue to challenge women's advancement. As we heard from our speakers this afternoon, addressing these issues requires a collective effort from individuals, organizations, and the broader scientific community to foster a more inclusive and equitable environment. Moving forward, we must commit to grounded and actionable solutions, more inclusive practices, diverse perspectives, as well as a culture where women feel valued and supported to sustain women's career growth, particularly in the convergence of STEAM, resilience, and sustainability. While progress has been made, our work is far from over. Thus, UP NISMED is committed to sustain our Women in STEAM initiatives. I thank our collaborator, the Austrian Embassy Manila, our dear speakers, Dr. Pamela Cajilig and Ms. Keylie Sanderson, to the Gender and Development Committee of UP NISMED, headed by Ms. Princess Catan, to our host, Dr. 𝗍𝗲 Mejia, and to all the participants who joined us this afternoon for a productive and meaningful celebration of women in STEAM. By working together, we can create a future where women are not only welcome in STEAM, but are empowered to lead, innovate, and shape a better world for all. Thank you very much and a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Director Monterola, for your meaningful words. On behalf of the organizers, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers, STEAM guests, and participants for making this event a success. May we continue to champion women in STEAM and inspire future generations to push boundaries and make meaningful contributions. I would also like to thank our co-organizer for this event, the Austrian Embassy in Manila. Just a few reminders for our participants: to receive your e-certificate of attendance, please answer the evaluation form through our QR code flash on screen. The evaluation form link will be emailed to the registered participants after the webinar, so please check your emails. Note that the evaluation form will be open until 11:59 p.m. on March 2024, 2025. That will be next week, Monday. And as we end today's event, I invite everyone for the singing of the University of the Philippines hymn, the UP Naming Mahal.
UP naming mahal, pamantang hirap, magdinig namin, sana'y inyong dinggin. Malayong lupa
Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. And again, happy Women's Month to all the strong, brilliant, and inspiring women out there.